You know, have you ever stopped to think about your body's oldest story? I'm not talking about the one you remember, but the one that was written long, long before you even had words.
That's where we're going today. We're diving into a time when our development was just pure axis, flow, and polarity. It's the very blueprint of our being.
So what if that oldest story, our most fundamental story, is actually written in just two simple lines? And what if an ancient map and cutting-edge science are telling the exact same story about how we're formed, how we get hurt, and most importantly, how we heal?
All right, let's start with that ancient map. We're talking about a blueprint that's thousands of years old, an incredible understanding of our body's core structure.
So in classical Chinese medicine, they identified these two primary lines of organization. First, you've got the Du Mai, which you can just think of as the back line. Then there's the Ren Mai, or the front line. And together, these aren't just some abstract ideas, they're describing our fundamental front and back architecture. And get this, these two vessels are said to connect, forming this continuous loop they call the microcosmic orbit. This is way more than just energy flow. It's like the body's first big declaration. Okay, this is front and this is back. This is how I'm going to receive the world, and this is how I'm going to act in it. Now let's fast forward a few thousand years and look at the very beginning of life, but this time through the lens of modern embryology. Because this is where these two stories start to line up in a way that is just, well, it's pretty mind-blowing.
Okay, so in the first few weeks after conception, we're basically just a tube that's busy organizing itself. The first thing it does, it establishes a front and a back. Modern science calls this the dorsal-ventral axis. Dorsal for back, ventral for front. Does that sound a little familiar?
And boom, here it is. This is the first incredible parallel. On the left, you see the ancient map of the Du Mai, the back line. And on the right, you see how an embryo literally forms its neural tube, which becomes our brainstem and spinal cord, right along its dorsal or back side. This is the circuitry for action, for moving forward, for rising up. It's just amazing. You have two totally different systems, separated by millennia, describing the exact same developmental event. It's the same story, just told in a different tongue. Different languages, same spine. But it doesn't stop at the back. Now look at the front line. On the left, that's the Ren Mai from Chinese medicine. And on the right, what do you see? The development of all our visceral organs, the heart, the lungs, the gut, all of them form along the ventral or front axis. This is the architecture of receiving, of taking in nourishment, of being sustained by the world. So we've got this fundamental structure, this midline axis. It's incredible. But what's it all for? What's its purpose? Well, before we ever think a single thought, our body has one primary, non-negotiable job. Way before our thinking brain, our cortex, comes online, the brain stem is running the show. It's the command center, and it is laser-focused on one question and one question only. Am I safe enough to exist right here, right now? Everything about our regulation is built on the answer to that question. And our main regulatory system, our superhighway for safety, is the vagus nerve. And guess what? It's wired directly into this front-back blueprint. It's got two main branches. There's the ancient dorsal-vagal pathway, which controls our most primitive shutdown or collapse response. And then there's the more evolved ventral vagal pathway, which governs social engagement, connection, and that feeling of safety with others. And this part right here is absolutely crucial. When we talk about early trauma, we're not talking about a bad story stored in our thinking brain. We are talking about a disruption to this fundamental regulatory system, a system that was up and running before cognitive memory was even a thing. So this begs a really important question. What happens when this fundamental blueprint, this beautifully balanced relationship between our front and our back, gets disrupted by early stress or shock or a break in connection? See, an overwhelming event in our earliest moments isn't processed like a story. It's a physiological reality. The system is just forced to adapt to survive. And those adaptations, they get physically etched right into the tension and the balance of our midline. And these adaptations usually show up in two main patterns. On one side, you have what we can call due dominance. The back line becomes overactivated, always on. This leads to chronic bracing, vigilance, that feeling that you constantly have to hold yourself together. Then on the other side, you can have Ren collapse, where the front line is under-supported. This can look like a collapsed chest, a guarded belly, and a real difficulty in receiving care or connection.
I mean, in the most profound way, our physical structure tells the story of our earliest experiences. It's like they say, posture becomes biography. How we feel, our emotional state, what scientists call our affect, it literally follows the physical structure that was laid down before we even knew we had a story to tell.
So, if the problem is written into our physiology, right into this preverbal midline, how in the world can we even begin to heal it? It's pretty clear we can't just talk our way out of this one.
Well, the answer is actually in working with the body, not against it. Modern therapies are now able to engage with these super deep patterns by helping the nervous system finally complete the movements and sequences that got frozen in time by that original shock.
Okay, let's look at an example to make this really clear. A model like deep brain reorienting, or DBR, recognizes that the body responds to a threat in a very specific sequence. Now, as you can see, most therapies jump in at step 4 with the emotion, the affect. But DBR says, wait a minute, the real disruption, the shock, that happened back at step 3. So real healing means we have to go upstream to resolve that frozen moment of shock before the emotional story even gets tacked on.
And this kind of work, it's incredibly precise. And it's slow. It's not about having some big dramatic emotional release or finding a new aha insight. It's about slowing everything way down and allowing the body's own deep intelligence to resolve these tiny, split-second physiological sequences that got stuck. And that really brings us to the heart of it all. This isn't about remembering an event like a movie. It's about the deep, procedural memory of how our system learned to survive, how it organized itself around safety and threat from the very first moments of life. So the next time you happen to notice how you're holding yourself, whether you're braced and vigilant or maybe a little collapsed and guarded, maybe try asking yourself a different kind of question. Not, what's wrong with me? But, what story is my body telling? And what is it trying to finish?